I'm glad to welcome you here in the Treffpunkt Rote Bühlplatz, the VHS, the Community College of Stuttgart, to our grand debate, presidential elections in the US. Let's talk about it with Democrats abroad and Republicans overseas. Welcome, and thank you for being here. I come back to you. Welcome to those joining us via live stream, and of course to you who came here. My name is Dagmar Mikasch-Köthner, and I'm the head of the Community College, the VHS here, and on behalf of the Volkshochschule and the German American Institute, our cooperation partner tonight, we like to welcome you all here. And this is Katrin Büttner, my colleague here to my left. And thank you very much, Katrin, for this wonderful collaboration, which this is the moment to say hi to Sabrina Möller as well, the head of the political education department here at the Volkshochschule, and both of them are responsible for this tonight event. And of course, a very warm welcome to Sasha Arrington. She's the Stuttgart and Southwestern Germany chapter chair of Democrats Abroad. Welcome and applause to you. And of course, we have the Republicans here as well from overseas. Michael D. Pierce is near Rockford, Illinois, and he's joining us via Zoom. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for joining us tonight. For you, it's morning or noon, around noon. Thank you for being with us, and we're looking forward to an interesting discussion and debate. And this is the moment to say hello also to Laureen Frick, our moderator tonight. Welcome, Laureen, and thank you for guiding us through this discussion, through this debate tonight. And this is, of course. And, well, Laureen will give an introduction in the evening. So what I want to do is to talk just a little bit about the Volkshochschule, the VHS, and why we do events like this with partners like the German American Institute. We usually, before elections, hold debates and evenings. We invite candidates to our Treffpunkt Rote Bühlplatz, for the European elections, or we will do it for the Bundestag elections next year. And now we have the fantastic opportunity to go overseas and to see what's going on in this really razor blade campaign, election campaign in the US. Some of you may have watched the candidates on TV. There was one debate on TV which you may have watched. But I think there's a little difference to have people here like Sasha and Michael, and to be able to get in contact with them, to ask your questions. Also via live stream, Laureen will explain to you how that will work. It makes a difference to get really in contact and to be very close to a discussion like we will have it tonight. And to be really close to what's going on in the US, as you have noticed, this evening is in English. So, but I like to say, if you feel free to ask your questions in German if you're not comfortable with asking something or saying something in English, we'll be able to translate everything, and you understand perfectly, and Michael, you as well. So if you don't feel comfortable with English, you can also ask your questions in German, of course. Yeah, this evening is part of a week of events like this, as well as the German American Institute, as at the VHS. We have a theme week, USA, and we don't only deep dive into the elections, but also let you get in contact with culture, film, theater, literature in the US. So feel free to, I think Sabrina has a program somewhere, or programs somewhere, so feel free to grab one before you leave the Volkshochschule tonight. So, and this was my short introduction, and I am pleased to hand over to Katrin, for the next step, let's say. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll just switch over here. Thank you. I also want to welcome you. I also want to say thank you to Dagmar Mikasch-Köthner and also to Sabrina Möller for doing this event with us tonight, and for having this very great collaboration together. I would like to welcome you all here at the VHS, and also those watching the live stream at home, or maybe at schools. I think there are some school classes that are watching together, so welcome to you too. We are very happy to present the event tonight in collaboration with the Volkshochschule, because for us it's always very important to work with partners and to go out of the DAZ, of our comfort zone, and go somewhere else to do events like this. So we're glad that we can be here tonight. My name is Katrin Büttner, as Dagmar already said, and I coordinate the school programs at the DAZ. And I don't know if everybody knows what the DAZ is, so I'll just tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I'll keep it short, I promise. So the German American Center in Stuttgart is a cultural institute and an educational institution that informs about the United States and fosters German-American relations. And we offer cultural events, English classes with American teachers. We also give educational advice to students who are interested in going to the US for a while. And we also have a library. So if you ever are interested in stopping by, just come to the Charlottenplatz, and we're open, and you can check out our library. This event today is part of our school program, which includes various programs like this for students, but also for teachers. And as you already mentioned, the US election is also a major focus for us this year, of course. So I just want to mention two more events that we will be having in the near future. On October 28th, we will be holding the event Kampf das Weiße Haus, in which Dr. Stefan Bierling will discuss possible election outcomes. And on November 5th, that's the election day, we will actually be following the developments through the night on, or at our big election night event, where Sasha and Mike will also be part of the program. So we'll see you there again. Now I'd like also to welcome you guys. So welcome Mike in Illinois, and welcome Sasha. We're really glad that you join us today again, and that you took the time to participate in this discussion. We're glad that we can do these kinds of events with you. So it's also my pleasure to introduce Lauren Frick, who will start the event with a short lecture before moderating the discussion. Lauren is an English teacher at the DAZ, has been since 2012. She teaches American politics, history, and effective writing for Abitur students. And we're really glad that she took on this job tonight. Thank you, Lauren, for being here. And lastly, I also want to encourage everyone to ask questions and engage with our panelists in the discussion in the live stream. I have to read this because I wrote it down. In the live stream, you can ask questions by writing them in the chat, but you have to be logged in for that. If you cannot log in, you can also send an email to Politik in German, P-O-L-I, oh, ich mach's mal auf Deutsch, P-O-I, nein, nochmal, P-O-L-I-T-I-K, also Politik at vhs-stuttgart.de. Jetzt habe ich es, glaube ich, richtig. Okay, so send in your questions and we will make sure to also consider your questions here in the room. So on that note, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you, everyone, and I'll wish you a great evening. Thanks.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, guys, hi. My name's Lauren. So I am going to talk to you for about 30 minutes, give you a nice little overview of some important election information. Sorry, I got to remember to hold this up. I have a lot to say and only 30 minutes to tell you, so I'm just jumping right in. So here we go. Nope. Nope, that's not it. Also not it. Do I go down or sideways? That's correct. I think it's correct. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Maybe we should have practiced this. I'm looking at the next slide. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I'm going to talk to you for 30 minutes, and then we'll get into our questions. Election 2024. Here we go. Okay. So in exactly 2 weeks from today, Americans are going to go to the polls and elect the next president, right? The 47th president. Obviously, it's very much the presidential race that's kind of dominating the news and the conversation right now. But try to keep in mind that there's some very important congressional races happening at the same time. All 435 seats in the House are open, and 34 of 100 seats in the Senate. So what's going to happen is the balance of power will change. This is how it currently looks. As you can see, the Republicans have a majority in the House at the moment, and the Democrats have a majority in the Senate, but this will change. So, we have a lot of seats open, right? I just said that. However, for a large majority of the races, we kind of already know who's going to win, right? And this is because there's a lot of states where it's clearly Democratic or clearly Republican. Take California, for example. They consistently send Democrats to Congress, right? So there's not a lot of surprises. The surprises, and what we really have to pay attention to on election night, is the swing states. Now, for the record, swing states, they're also called battleground states. Don't be confused if you hear interchangeably those words. It means the same thing. And these are the states where the races are very tight, they're very competitive, and they could go either way, right? This election cycle, the main swing states that need our attention: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. So keep your eye on these 7 states. These states will decide the outcome of the election. Quick note about Ohio. You see I have it in my little asterisk there. Ohio, they have a very interesting situation happening in the Senate race right now. There is I think since 2007, Ohio, they used to be a swing state, but the last 2 election cycles, they have voted overwhelmingly Republican. So right now, they're not considered a swing state anymore. They're kind of Republican leaning, but they have 1 elected Democratic official in the Senate. His name is Sherrod Brown. He's been there since 2007, and he's being challenged by a first-time running Republican. His name is Bernie Moreno, and he was born in Colombia. He's a very wealthy businessman, and he was kind of handpicked by Trump. So this is going to be a very interesting race to see if a first-time kind of America First candidate can take a long-held Democratic seat. So keep your eye on the swing states and Ohio. What do I want to talk about next? Yes. So in order to really understand why these swing states matter so much, why are these states going to be the outcome of the election? It has to do with the Electoral College. So I talk to my Abbey students a lot about this, so let me just give you a quick overview of what it means, because it can be a little bit confusing. So we have the popular vote, and then we have the Electoral College. So what happens is, okay, first of all, every state has a certain number of Electoral College votes, right? This is based on population. The more people, the more Electoral College votes, right? Look at California. They have a lot of people. They have a lot of votes. So what happens is, in 2 weeks, Americans are going to go to the polls, and they're going to vote for the president that they want. This is the popular vote. Now, the majority, the person who wins the popular vote, they will win all the Electoral College votes for that state. Okay, this is called a winner-takes-all system. So let's say Florida, for example, where I'm from, my home state. If 6 million people on election day vote for Harris, and 6,000,001 vote for Trump, then Trump will win by that one vote all 30 of Florida's Electoral College votes. And mathematically, it's not possible to get to 270, right? This is the magic number on election day. A candidate must reach 270 Electoral College votes in order to be president. And mathematically, you can't do that without those critical swing states, right? So that's one of the reasons why they matter so much. Now, I know you're going to ask me, because all my Abbey students do, can it be that a candidate wins the popular vote, but does not win the Electoral College, right? Yes, this can happen. It's happened 5 times in history. The most latest, anybody know? 2016. Yeah. 2016, right? Hillary Clinton actually won 3 million more popular votes, but she lost the Electoral College vote. I probably don't have the time to get into the history of it. I love history, so I always want to talk a lot about it. But it's an imperfect system, and the founding fathers, they knew that it was an imperfect system. It was the result of a compromise between all the people trying to form this new government about who should be responsible for electing the president, and how do we count population votes, right? This is what they came up with. And every election cycle, we hear kind of grumbles and complaints, usually from the losing party, about, oh, it's time to get rid of the Electoral College. It's not useful anymore. It's outdated. And the short answer to that is that it's theoretically possible, but it's not probable. And that is because it's in the Constitution. And to change the Constitution, you need to have a super majority in the Congress, and you also need 3/4 of all states to agree to it. Ain't happening anytime soon. So, this is our system. So remember, 270 on election night is the number. Getting into our candidates now. Ladies first, so we'll begin with Kamala Harris. And yes, for the record, her name is pronounced comma, like put a comma after the word and sometimes. Kamala. And she is 60 years old. She's from California. Her mother, she died. Her mother was from India. Her father from Jamaica. She got a law degree and then began her career as the Attorney General. If you guys don't know that term, it just means kind of like the top lawyer, right? So she was the Attorney General for San Francisco and then later became Attorney General of all California before moving on to the Senate. And like we all know, she is the current Vice President of Joe Biden, who we all thought a few months ago would be in this race, right? But there was a debate back in June with Trump that did not go so well for Biden. Afterwards, there was a lot of criticism, coming from his own party as well, that perhaps he was just too old. He's 81 years old. When is that limit, right? During the debate, he appeared a bit confused and wasn't so articulate with his answers. So after some pressure and some, soul searching, he decided to drop out, endorsed Harris, and then in August, that was officially official, right? That Harris was the new Democratic candidate. She has picked Tim Walz as her running mate. And obviously, I've been in Germany for a while because I have to say Walz, Tim Walz. I can't even do it the American way anymore. Is it like waltz, I guess? Yeah. So I'm just going to say Tim Walz. So he's from Minnesota. He was a high school teacher for, I think, 20 years or so, and a football coach. He was a member of the National Guard. And then he went on to become a congressman. He was reelected 5 times before becoming the governor of Minnesota. So these are the Democratic candidates. What do people like about Harris? Okay, a small example. So they say she's calm, steady leader. Right, they used the example back in September, the debate, if you guys saw that, between Harris and Trump. They said, look at her, she's so calm, she's cool, she's collected, she looked presidential, right? That's what they say. They also say that she's highly qualified, and indeed, as vice president, she is the highest ranking woman in U.S. political history, right? No other woman has reached those heights. Hillary Clinton, she was Secretary of State. Vice President is higher. So, they say she's experienced. And a lot of voters also really like her message. Out on the campaign trail, she talks a lot about, let's be optimistic, let's be hopeful, let's be positive. America's a great place. We have some problems. Let's fix those. Right, so she talks a lot about joy and kind of just bringing the positivity back into politics. On the other hand, obviously, she has faced her fair share of criticism. Because she's from California, this is often used against her. It's this kind of idea that, California and New York, the coastal elites, that they're out of touch with normal Americans, right? Helps us understand in 2016 why Trump was elected, right? Because it was like the regular normal Americans, we don't identify with this kind of elitism, right? So her critics like to use California against her. What we often hear as well from critics is they describe her as a Marxist or communist. And, perhaps in Germany, it doesn't have the same negative kind of loaded meaning like it does in the US. But, keep in mind, in the US, we had the Cold War for decades, right? So generations of Americans were conditioned to fear this word, right? That was the bad word in American politics and American society. Right, so the Cold War is over. It's been over for a while, but that kind of negative emotion behind this word, communism, Marxist, still stands, right? So people are distrustful of it. Lately, the right has been, some, not all, have been using this term DEI hire, that Harris is a DEI hire. I don't know if you guys have heard this before. It stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it relates to certain policies that jobs have about promoting diversity in the workplace, like that they would give women, for example, priority, or minorities priority in the application process. So breaking it down, basically what they mean is that she only got her job because she's a woman and because she's black. And then the last one that we hear all the time is that she's weak on immigration, right? This is, we'll get into it with our panelists, but this is because under Biden, the number of crossings from the southern border from Mexico into the United States, it spiked, right? So they said we need to have somebody who's tougher on immigration. In general, and like I just said, we're going to get more into this with our panelists shortly, but in general, this is the message, right? This is what Harris and Walz are campaigning on. It's also, a kind of a typical Democratic philosophy of the world. They say we need a strong federal government, that, laws need to come from Washington, because if they don't, then the states are going to go crazy and do whatever they want. So it needs to be strong DC, strong federal government. Entitlement programs, this has to do, I won't bore you guys too much because it doesn't apply to you, but it has to do with like Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, like social welfare, right? They say that this is important. Abortion, huge hot topic right now, right? Because Roe versus Wade was repealed by the Supreme Court back in 2022. She is a fierce defender of the right to have one. LGBTQ plus rights, stricter gun control. What's interesting is that both she and Walz went on the campaign trail and they said, hey, look, we're gun owners. We have guns. But at the same time, we recognize that there needs to be stricter laws in the United States. Climate change, very important. Strong separation of church and state. This basically just means, like, let's not have any religion, doctrine influence public policy. In terms of foreign policy, Biden especially has been a strong supporter of Ukraine. He says we're going to, keep providing military assistance until they win. And so, Harris has said that she would continue that as president. And lastly, a belief in the value of international alliances like NATO, right? On the other hand, we have our Republican candidates, and it's probably the man who needs no introduction because at this point you guys are pretty familiar with him. Former President Donald Trump, he is 78 years old. And, voters, they're going to have to decide for themselves how they feel about this. Biden was 81, and a majority basically said, we're getting a little too advanced in age, right? Trump is 3 years younger. Everybody has to decide for themselves. His career highlights, you guys probably know his backstory at this point. He was the CEO of the Trump Organization, which was very successful real estate construction company, and he ran that for a long time. I think he took over from his father. What was that, in like 1971? So he really, really has a lot of experience as one of the ultimate kind of businessmen in America. And then, like we all know, he also has job experience. He has done this before, right? He was the 45th president in 2016. Who might be less well known to you guys is his running mate, J.D. Vance. Have you guys kind of heard anything about him a little bit? Most Americans kind of didn't know Walz either, to be fair. Like, we didn't really know much about him as well. So J.D. Vance, he has a very compelling backstory. He grew up dirt poor in Ohio and Kentucky. As a child, he faced, poverty, drug addiction, abuse, neglect, like horrible, horrible childhood. And he was able to overcome that, which is amazing. He joined the Marine Corps straight out of high school, and he worked as a military journalist for 4 years, I believe, and then was able to go on and get a law degree from Yale, which is, one of the most prestigious schools in the United States. He later wrote a book, a best-selling book about his experience. It's called Hillbilly Elegy. They also made it into a film. Have you guys seen it? No? Oh, you should actually watch it. It's a really good film. I think it's still on Netflix. Amy Adams plays his mom. So yeah, and he's 40 years old, which also makes him one of the youngest, not the youngest, but one of the youngest candidates in history. He's the first from my generation, the millennials, the first millennial candidate for vice president. Okay, so what do people love about Trump? A lot. Here's a short list. They say that we were better off 4 years ago than we are now. 52% of Americans agree with that we were better off 4 years ago than we are right now. This largely has to do with inflation, the cost of living. Things are more expensive. I was in North Carolina, which is a swing state, in August visiting my mama. And I have to tell you, I was shocked at the prices just going to the grocery store. The deodorant, I should have picked a better one, but the deodorant that we usually buy that costs €2.95 at Rossmann was literally $10 at the local grocery store. And we were I'd rather smell than buy that. I'm not going to buy it. Well, that was a little spontaneous comment. So, but this is true for across the board, right? Groceries, gas, utilities, everything is more expensive right now. We could dig deeper into the reasons behind this. Inflation globally hit, but in the U.S. it's quite high. It should be at about 2%. That's like kind of the perfect number. And under Biden, and I think it was it 2 years ago? I'm sure Dr. Pierce will correct me. It hit 8% more. So it's a big issue. They also say that they need somebody really tough on immigration, right? This is one of Trump's kind of main arguments, right? That he is the tough guy on immigration, and his supporters, they really love that. And again, it goes back to this idea of the elites. Trump is not from the Washington circles. He was an outsider back in 2016, and he rebelled and bucked the system and bucked the norms, and his supporters love it. So for them, it's nothing but a strength. Like we all know, there's a lot of criticism. The first is that his comments and his philosophy are too authoritarian, right? That it's bordering on fascism. They say this for a few reasons. First of all, it's because he has a track record of praising known autocrats, right? So he talks about Vladimir Putin. He talks about Kim Jong-un in North Korea. He talks about, during the debate in September with Harris, he talked about, Viktor Orban, he loves me in Hungary. Maybe not the best job reference if you're a Democrat, right? They say that, this is too authoritarian, and the path you're going down is incompatible with the values of the United States. He also is heavily criticized for the terms he uses to describe immigrants, right? He describes them as vermin, as criminals, as animals, right, who are poisoning the blood. And that's, a very kind of loaded phrase to say, poisoning the blood of Americans. And then lately, in the last few months, he started using a phrase which is sending off kind of red flags for his critics, and that is that the biggest threat facing America is actually from the enemies within. right? So it's this fear that he would use presidential power to go after the political opposition, right? His critics also say that he lies too much. too much. And that means that he's just untrustworthy, right? And then the last one that we hear the most is that, he needs to be disqualified from even being presidency because of the impeachments, because of January 6th, because of the felony convictions. So we have to talk about that. Bear with me. There's a lot to say here. So, to be U.S. president, the Constitution is actually pretty easy. You just have to be 35. You just have to be a native-born American. And you just have to have lived in the United States for 14 years. There's nothing about a criminal conviction. So he is absolutely 100% eligible to run. The only way that he could actually be disqualified from running is if he had been charged with insurrection. Do you guys know that this word insurrection? It's like a coup d'etat, like you're trying to overthrow the government, right? And that's why he was impeached. The second time he was impeached for exactly that. And guess what? The Congress found him not guilty. They acquitted him. If you were just my Abbey students, I would make you write that down as your vocab word. Acquitted, like he was found not guilty. And that would be the only way, is if Congress found him guilty on that, and they did not. However, he is facing 4 major cases at the moment. The first one has to do with the $130,000 he paid in hush money back in 2016 to kind of cover up, there was a sex scandal and he wanted to cover it up. He was indeed found guilty in this one in New York. 34 counts of, let me make sure I get it right, falsifying business records. So he does have a felony conviction. The sentencing for this case will not happen until the end of November. Now, everybody loves to ask me this, will he go to prison? Nobody knows. It's up to the judge. The judge in New York has to decide. On the one hand, he is a first-time offender. It was a nonviolent crime, typically not something that warrants jail time. There's also the issue of he's a former president, right? He has Secret Service. Like, where are the Secret Service gonna stay? There's logistical issues with sending Trump to prison. On the other hand, he has been held in contempt of court a few times, which means basically he was kind of bad in the courtroom. He was supposed to stay silent about it, but he kept on social media talking about it in violation of the court order. And he also attacked personally the judge and his family, saying that he was being biased to him. So it could range from anywhere from he gets community service and has to go, pick up trash on the road in New York, to 4 years, to 4 years in prison. Bah, nobody knows. Stay tuned. The other 2 cases, Florida and DC, these are federal cases. We don't really have time to get into them. Because in Florida, he was accused of taking classified documents from the White House when he left. A Florida judge recently dismissed this case, and they said, no, it's not going to go ahead anymore. The special, what's his name, Jack Smith in DC, he's trying to find a way to still go after him. We don't know. It's open-ended. It might never take place. It might. It depends a lot on the outcome of the election, actually. In DC, so this is also related to January 6th. And again, it's in political limbo right now, legal limbo, not sure if it's going to happen. In Georgia, another state case, this has to do with immediately after the 2020 election, when apparently he pressured Georgia officials to find 11,000 votes, right? Because Georgia was the key swing state and he needed to win it. Also kind of, nobody really knows what's happening at this point. For sure, nothing until next year, 2025. So the only one that's kind of moving forward is the New York one. The second question I'm asked the most is, can he pardon himself, right? Because presidents do have pardon power. The short answer is nobody knows. Buckle up, it's going to be an interesting ride. He for sure can't do it in the state cases. A president only has power in federal cases. So in New York and Georgia, he can't. So we'll see. Okay, in general, Trump and Vance, this is their platform. You know, unlike the Democrats, they believe in giving states more power, because, you know, states across the US, it's so different. It's so different, right? So they say, let the states decide what's best for them. They also champion deregulation, financial oversight committees, things like that. It's just kind of unnecessary rules that impede business. Clearly opposing abortion, same-sex marriage. This is because their philosophies tend to be guided by Christianity, right? They believe that religion should play a role in public policy. They are firm believers in gun control, firm believers in the Second Amendment, so they oppose any kind of gun control. We'll dive deep in a second, but climate change, also unnecessary kind of regulations. As far as foreign policy, you know, critical of aid to Ukraine. Trump is very famous for talking kind of disparagingly, negatively about NATO. And of course, hardline policies on immigration. I cannot have a conversation with you guys without discussing the fact that America is super polarized at the moment. You know, it's just a fact, right? Look at these numbers. 62% of Republicans have a very, not just unfavorable, very unfavorable view of the Democrats. And Democrats, 54%. It's high. And the trend, you know, especially in the last decade, what we're seeing is that the right is getting righter. I don't know if that's grammatically correct. I'm a teacher, I should know that. But the right is getting righter, and the left is getting lefter, right? So it's getting harder and harder to find that common ground. You know, look at what we just talked about. I presented you two candidates with seemingly polar views of the world, right? And sadly, as further evidence, we only need to look at the fact that, you know, there were 2 assassination attempts on former President Trump in the last few months. And all the experts say that this is a result of political polarization, right? We need to calm it down. It's been simmering a long time, right? And with these assassination attempts, it's kind of like it's just boiling over, right? Time to calm it down. And that's one of the reasons that you hear Democrats lately say, instead of Biden's messaging back in the summer of saying, you know, Trump is the biggest threat to our democracy, like I had up on the screen, right? They're trying to tone that down a little bit, and instead, Harris and Valtz, what are they calling them? You guys know? They're calling them weird. Yeah. Tone it down, right? Okay, looking at the current polling in the swing states, before I do, a huge giant asterisk, huge giant caveat. Polls are very much an imperfect science, right? In October 2016, the New York Times said that Hillary Clinton had a 91% chance of winning, right? We all know the outcome of that election. So careful, careful, careful with putting too much trust into polling. However, it is indeed still useful. So in the swing states right now, it's neck and neck. I mean, less than 1%, 2%, this is nothing. This just means as close as you can possibly get, right? Also keep in mind, because the margins are so close, we will not get a clear winner on election night. Sorry to say. So don't stay up all night long, because it's going to take 2 weeks, just like it did back in 2020. I stayed up all night in 2020. And I was like, oh, man. Because the states, they say that when it is so close, it's an automatic recount. And that takes a long time. They have to, like, go through, like, ballot by ballot and do it. So it's going to be like 2020. It's going to be a long time. What else do I want to say? In the interest of time, I'm just going to fly over these next 2 slides. Sorry, guys, if we had more time. The last thing I'll say about this is that right now, there's early voting happening. And these numbers are super high. So what it looks like is that this is, and we say this every time, but this time I really mean it for real. It's going to be like a historic turnout. Like, people are voting, right? So it's going to be stressful. It's going to be exciting. Stay tuned. These are the issues that people are voting for, right? Economy, number 1. Entitlements, like I was talking to you about earlier. Education, abortion, gun control, social issues, immigration, climate change, foreign policy. Looking, and I'm sorry guys, I have to move fast. My apologies. Looking at the polls, right? The number 1 issue that people care about is the economy. It always has been, at least in my living memory. This is the issue, right? Because this is the one that hurts people the most. If I go to the grocery store and pay $10 for my deodorant, I'm really unhappy about it, right? Economy, number 1. So, what we will do, make sure I get this right, is, I think we will transition now to the reason you all came tonight. It wasn't to hear me, I know it. It's okay. To talk with our lovely panelists. Indeed. So we have, again, Miss Sasha Arrington. She is a sociologist and teaches in the Stuttgart area. She's from California, just like Harris. But she's been overseas for most of her life. And she's been involved with Democrats Abroad for a couple years now, like 4 years. And she's the current chair. So she is the big wig for us tonight. And then Dr. Michael Pierce, sorry, you had to listen to me go on and on for a while. He is a retired U.S. Army major. He attended North Central College, and he went into the Army, first as an enlisted soldier, and later on he earned his commission in the Signal Corps. And after 20 years, is that correct? 20 years serving, he retired in 2012 and continued to work at U.S. European Command at U.S. AFRICOM as a DoD contractor. So we are very happy that they're here tonight. And now I get to grill them. It's going to be fun. Sasha, do you want to join me, please? Okay, so for the record, they do know the questions before. I have 4. What's happening? Not sure if I changed that. I prepared 4 questions. We'll see how the time goes because I really want to make sure that we have time for you guys to ask any questions that you want. So if I have to cut my questions short for you, I will do it. Okay, so we are going to begin with a question about the economy because like I just said, this is really the #1 issue. And remember, if you have questions, either in the YouTube chat or as Katrine said earlier, at politik@VHS, oh, you get to listen to my bad German, woohoo, Stuttgart DE. Okay, so a little bit of a intro into the question, right? So this is kind of the situation we're dealing with. So the Labor Department, they announced that inflation had reached its lowest level in more than 3 years in July, which was the latest sign that the worst price spike in 4 decades is fading. Remember, I told you it was up at 8%, right? It should be at 2, and it was up at 8. But consumers, people, are still feeling the impact of higher prices, something that Trump's campaign is really hoping that will motivate voters to vote Republican. Polling shows that Americans are more likely to trust Trump over Harris when it comes to handling the economy and immigration. Those are really their strongest issues. So my question is, what would your candidate do to improve the U.S. economy and lower these prices for consumers? So, how should we do it? Anybody want to volunteer and go first? Or should I just... Yeah, we... Dr. Pierce, would you mind? Uh-oh. One moment, we can't hear you.
Can I talk?
Oh, now we
hear
hear
me?
you. Wonderful, thank you. So you heard my question, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so ready when you are.
Yeah, all right. Sure. I guess I kind of missed. I thought Sasha was going to go, but I'll go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I think the first.
Diplomatic.
There's a little bit of a delay. Sorry. So I think the first thing that Trump has already put out in terms of policy that they'll kind of take some changes on the regulations that have made kind of impeded the economy. They'll open up the spigots and produce more fuel, making efforts to keep American businesses back here in the States through some policies. For example, they'll give them a lower tax rate if they have this manufacturing done here versus being done overseas. So that would stimulate the jobs. I think that by having the gas prices go down and energy prices in general, that will have a significant impact, as it did here. It's funny because when I came here right after the election to make a visit, gas prices were up, tremendously, and it started a trail of price rises all around. And now you've got prices much, much higher. Bureau of Labor Statistics says that overall they're 20% higher than they were. But I was shopping this morning at an American grocery store, and when you see bacon for $7, you see milk for over $5 a gallon when it used to be less than that. To get name brand butter for $6, it's kind of crazy. And I know the gas prices are kind of the start of the chain of that. So that's one of the most important things that they can do. And really, it sends a message because that's where people hits them in the pocketbook the most, is the grocery prices, and it causes a climatic effect. So if we can just drop those down, that would make a significant difference. And I'm pretty sure that's where they're going towards. So easing of regulations, getting a higher level of output of the fuel that America has, selling it to our visitors overseas, and then also trying to take care of some of the extras that have gone into the budget over the last several years, which resulted in this inflation that we had.
From the Democratic side, what Vice President Harris is, what she would do going forward is, first of all, to raise the taxes on large corporations, which are around 21% right now, to about 35%, because the corporations need to pay their fair share. It can't be that the Bezos of this world and other corporations are making such huge profits, and not only are their employees not benefiting off of this, but also the public. Another point that Harris sees as very important is child care, to make child care affordable and available, because this is something that she heard very often in the town halls, is that child care is very expensive, and that you can't have two people working if the child care before age 6 is so expensive. So that is something that she sees to take the burden off of families and their high costs. And some other things, yeah, the taxing of the corporations, the child care, those are two important things. And then the price gouging. This, again, are the corporations that are making huge profits, and yet they're not dropping their prices. And there have been very many examples of this, where the profit margin was very, very high for grocery store chains, for example, and instead of dropping the prices so that the average individual could benefit from this, they raised the prices instead. So these are things that Vice President Harris would look at.
The grocery stores only make between a 1% and 3% profit. That's a statistic. That's a fact. So it's not price gouging. That's a misnomer. It has to do with the costs that have been passed on, starting with the cost of the fuel and the fertilizer, which is because those prices went up enormously, partially because of policies that made it more expensive here, but also because you have less oil being pumped in the world because into the greater economy because of the Ukraine and Russia war, regardless of whether it's how it started or not. That's an increase in the fuel costs, and as fuel is also used for making the fertilizer, which makes it more expensive for the food, which drives the cost up for the farmers. So
right now on the campaign trail is selling many items of various beauty, and they are not made in America. So I find it is very good to lead by being a role model and actually have the things that you yourself sell made in America. And yes, that's to the point that you made. But I do think another point for the making it in America is the wage. This is another thing. The minimum wage that Vice President Harris has spoken about is to raise it to $15. If you are a one-person household or a two-person household, and you have to pay for daycare on less than $15 an hour, how are you going to do it? How are you going to survive? How are you going to pay your rent? So these are things that Vice President Harris is looking at. She wants people to be able to afford to buy their own homes. She wants people to be able to afford to do the things that maybe some of you in Germany take for granted, to be able to have health insurance, to be able to pay for things. And you can't do that if you are earning so very little. And Trump is kind of skirting around the issue of raising the minimum wage. So that's something also that I would say is an important factor, that people can afford more, that they get a fair wage for their work.
I just point of order, if I may. The minimum wage, I think it's great to improve how much people make and earn, but the problem is that most of, many small businesses, I can't say all because we're all kind of sociology thing, you can never say all, but many businesses which have had to increase the minimum wage, like they put in California, resulted in people losing their jobs. And so, yes, the people that are working, they're doing more work and they're getting paid more, but there's less people to do the work and makes it more difficult for the people who are working. If you people want to get a piece of the American dream, which they were getting a few years ago when wages were rising, the overall economy was improved and the cost to borrow money was lower because it's several percentage points lower, making it much more affordable to be able to buy a home, the American dream. Once things go over 3% up to the interest rate that it was gone up to 6 points, and even though they took it down a half point, once there's a certain point that people are like, they're holding on to it. And so less expensive homes aren't being sold. And so people can't buy into a home. And then the people who own a home and want to buy a new home, they can't. So that also has a corresponding effect in the economy because it reduces the number of new homes that are being built, even though there's a need for new homes. And thus you have an increase in rent because there's 10 million more people in the United States than there were a few years ago. And because people are getting subsidized money from the government to help house the millions of people who've just come in the last 3 years, that also drives up the prices in the local towns. And so people are impacted by this. And so, again, even if you increase the minimum wage, they're going to lose the jobs and it's costing them more to live in the same place that they used to live in.
Sasha, I apologize. I'm going to stop you on responding. Yes, sorry. I'm gonna stop you in the interest of time on responding. So, you know, minimum wage, guys. Like, what is the minimum wage in Germany? Do you guys have one? Because for a long time, you guys didn't have a minimum wage. Is that correct? And then it passed, right? So, just like in here, you know, there's questions in the United States about, okay, what is the best way? Do we keep it where it's at? What is it currently? Is it 9?
It depends on the state. California
On the
has
state,
raised
right?
it. California is always a little ahead of the times.
Yes, indeed. So, you know, is the solution to raise it? You know, is that a factor to motivate or not? In the interest of time, though, we have to move to immigration, which for the American voter is critical, right? This will be a deciding factor. So, you know, it's because it's, okay, economy number one, right? But immigration is number two. So within my question, just to kind of give you guys a forewarning here, I ask about birthright citizenship. And this is refers to the 14th Amendment, which says that all people born in the U.S., like on U.S. soil, have automatic citizenship, right? It's kind of a mainstay of our country's immigration policy. So my question is to please explain the candidate's position towards illegal and legal. We always have to distinguish between the two, right? In general, and then specifically the future of that kind of fundamental 14th Amendment. Is that something that we would keep or not? So I surprised Mike earlier by starting with him first. But now I guess he's prepared to go first. I don't know. I messed it all up. Yeah. Was Sasha first? Okay, Sasha.
So your question is about the issue of birthright?
So the question is if you could explain Harris's position towards legal and illegal, and then also that 14th Amendment question. Would that stay or not?
All right. I know that Trump would like to change that. That has been in law for like 200 years. I would estimate because the founding fathers said, wait a minute, what makes us American? How can we define who is American? And then they said, yeah, we'll do it like this. It's the people that were born here. They will be American. And that's how we have these accidental Americans that I sometimes meet when we're helping people to register to vote. because they may have been born there because their parents lived in the US. There are many different reasons why people are Americans but may not have large ties to the US. But if you were born there, you get the right to vote. And I think that's the bottom line on why the Republican Party would like to change this, because people that travel, people that have lived overseas or may live overseas now, they tend to see the world a little differently, and they tend to kind of pick the good things out of different countries that they lived in and vote that way also. And so it tends to be that people that live overseas, that have had the wonderful experience of knowing how other countries function, might vote Democratic. And I think that is the issue, the core issue of why the Republican Party, or why Trump is talking about changing that. Yeah.
Mike, would you first like to respond to the 14th Amendment question, and then we'll get in deeper into legal and illegal?
Sure. So the 14th Amendment was as a result of the American Civil War, and so they put that in there so that basically that the African Americans would be able to have considered citizenship. They made that because people were saying, not only they were freed, they had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So that was to enshrine the fact that they were all Americans if they were born there. And interestingly enough, the intent of it, the Democrats want to keep the intent of the Constitution for that. However, for other things, they want it to be a sliding thing. So that's a little bit of an inconsistency. Now, as far as birthright, citizenship, I agree with it, because my daughter was born in Germany, but as a service member under NATO, she's considered being under an American. However, there are a lot of people who are abusing the system. I think that's where a lot of people's concerns are. It's not so much just about the voting. It's also about coming in and having a child and then being able to come into the U.S. and being eligible for things. And Americans are funny about line cutting. This is a generalization, but I know that a lot of people, if you've ever been in a line in Germany, maybe a show of hands, people could show me, how many of the people in the Germans, when you go to the bakery, you form an orderly line? Probably, I know many times I've been one and I've seen people cut in front of me left and right. And they do things a little differently over in Europe. But in the United States, we're really funny about lines. Like, people get in fights if you try to cut in line. I mean, this is sometimes on the news. So a large part of this, believe it or not, is because people are not following the process to become a citizen. And when one comes in just so that they can have a child born overseas through a surrogate mother, as I was speaking to a mother last week, she's done 3 of these things where she's been a surrogate mother for people from overseas so their child could get citizenship. That's just a fact. It's not some made up thing, because I actually spoke with a person about that. So I don't think the Republicans have a fear of people from other countries coming in and becoming and living the American dream. It's just we want people that go through a process so that they're in the light, if you will, and not something where it's been done in a way that's criminal or a way which actually exploits the person and other people, which has been that's really the crux of the problem.
So just to follow up, so how do you reconcile keeping the essence of the 14th Amendment while, like you said, weeding out the abuse? Like, what is the solution here?
The point is that if you've come over here illegally, that's a problem. You need to go through the process that they've enshrined to make it so that, in other words, you're not going to get the citizenship, that American citizenship, if you didn't follow the rules to get over here. If you're a refugee, then there are provisions in there. If you came over here illegally and you want to become legal, there are ways to get that. There's a process. Even if you come over here illegally, you can get sponsorship. But the thing is that they need to get into the light and get, in a line, and that is where people are not doing. And when they just simply come over, they made it across the border, and then they have their baby, it's a little bit something that causes a bit of heartache. And nowadays, it's kind of more sophisticated. People are actually paying people to have their kids so that they have that citizenship thing. So a part of it is, clamping down on where people's children are born in the States and the parents and longevity. And I certainly can't, speak to every aspect of the immigration system. I'll just simply, conclude with this, that if people follow through the lines and they make that and follow the process which was in place, then more people would be, agreeable to that. I don't think Americans have a problem with immigrants. Most of us, our backgrounds are immigrants. But a lot of those people, they had to come through, especially regardless of whether they're Indian, and I mean like Asian, from Asia, India, or whether they're from, South America or other places, they had to go through the legal route to do it. And so they don't like to see other people just simply coming in after they had to wait 10, 15 years to be able to come to the States legally. And as far as the fear of people voting, Hispanics, and I heard some disparaging comments made about Trump, about things that he was saying earlier. It's not that he's putting them all in there. He's not a sociologist, so he's not going to say some or many. He might saying as a group, but mostly people understand where he's coming from. The bottom line is these people that he's referring to are the criminal element of it. He's not talking about the hardworking people who've put their time in and who are just here to work, and they are the hardest working people you'll ever met. So I think most Americans have a positive opinion of immigrants. It's just they don't like the criminal elements of it.
Okay. So just to summarize for you guys, so, he's saying that the Republicans, their view is that America is still, open for immigration, that most Americans are from an immigrant background, but that they want people to follow the rules. They want people to go through the process of becoming immigrants. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Okay, climate change, because I know that this is something that you guys care a lot about. So let's talk about America and their policies towards climate change. Mike, would you like to go first again?
Happy to. I think Trump has already said he's very, environmentally supportive. We want to support the environment. In general, the Republicans are for that. What we don't want to do is hamstring our economy, especially at a time when we are in an economic crisis, while other countries who are also near peer competitors, have some more largely global aspirations, while they're pulling ahead of us economically and as a result militarily costing us more at the same time as we're trying to implement things to make things done in a cleaner way. And in America, you have strong environmental protections already. And so we are not part of a world global. The Republican position is not to be part of this global thing because it's done specifically to hamstring Americans. I mean, let's take a look at Germany. So much of Germany's, whether you talk about coal or other resources, are imported. So of course, Germany can say they have lower emissions and they're meeting emission standards. But if you're the ones who are producing the coal, or if you're the third world country who's producing the coal to send to Germany, that's kind of going around things. And so the U.S. position is, look, or not the U.S. position, but the fact is that if the U.S. signs on to these things, it hurts us because then we can't be as competitive with our products as other countries are because they are going around the rules because the biggest polluters are excluded. That would be India, Russia, China. All of those people are not participating in the program. And so we're doing a pretty good job over here in the States, even without a protocol. But if you put that on us, then it's only going to get worse for the Americans who are also dealing with people. And we have a large military role in the world as well, and and in NATO. So this makes it more difficult for the total American consumers and everybody else who's involved with that. And so these climate policies have kind of taken away of hamstring in the U.S. versus being really an overall improvement in the world because the main polluters continue to pollute.
Okay, so again, to summarize, the Republican position is that the policies hamstring, which means kind of like stop the economic growth, and that it doesn't actually solve the problem, which is, like you said, that the main pollution is coming from India and Brazil and the developing economies. Just because I know it's hard for you guys probably to hear them clearly, so I just want to summarize for you. Sasha, what would you say about this, and what is Harris's position? What would the future look like under a Harris presidency?
Well, the first step is to acknowledge that climate change is real. That's very important, not to deny that this is happening. And once you get beyond that point, then to implement things. It's very nearsighted, though, to say we have to think of our economy and not think of our natural country as well. Be it the parks that we have or the natural resources that we have, the water, to make sure that we have clean water to drink. And Vice President Harris would like to make sure that people that contaminate the soil or the water, that they are punished more than they have in the past, that you have to, as a company, be responsible for what you're producing and what you're letting into the environment, and to look forward. What are the options? What is the alternative way of making energy? And she's very much aware that we have to deal with what we have at the moment. We can't make huge strides right away, but we have to work towards green energy and towards the future that we have a planet to hand over to the next generation. And that starts with not denying that there is a problem, that we are in crises. And that's something that I find Vice President Harris does very well.
Mike, would you like to respond?
I would just say that I think that Sasha and I are in violent agreement on the parks and so forth. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican, and he started our national park system. He's a lot of people who support Trump and who support the Republicans are very, very big environmentalists. That goes all the way down to the hunters and everybody else. And I think that we're not opposed on those issues or the water or anything like that. What we're opposed to is government mandated influences on the automotive market, on the big manufacturing areas where American, and also this will affect Germany as well, by putting, like, for example, the e-autos, which eliminate jobs, and it will also eliminate jobs in Germany. That's already been shown to do that. The electric autos, which are not, have been shown to be not as effective, and which are using materials and elements which are being mined by people in third world countries, many of them child labor. And so it's not saving the economy by some of these ideas that they've come up with. Now, I don't know whether, I can't say specifically what's going on in the climate. I don't think people should go around denying it, but I also don't think that the sky is falling. And I think that usually the answer lies somewhere in the middle, as well as the causes to things as well. So we should all be prudent in how we use the stewardship of our resources, but we shouldn't have the government destroying industries before they've got real solutions that can actually make it. And subsidizing it and taking money from one area is another reason why we've got the inflation that we've got, and why Germany has also made that recognition that they went too far in subsidizing other industries and got too far away so that they can't even maintain their own industries, i.e. coal and iron and steel, because you need those things if you want to be able to have a strong military and to be able to stand up in the world. Otherwise, your policies will end up with your enemies consuming you.
May I say something to that?
Of course, yes.
Letting companies self-regulate is a very bad idea. We've seen that in the past, that we have polluted water, we have polluted soil. The government has to be involved and has to make regulations that everybody has to stick to, and this is what Vice President Harris wants to do, that the corporations that break these rules get punished heavier because we've had incidents where the drinking water was contaminated by corporations trying to skirt-tail the rules. So I really do believe that it's very important that there is some sort of a guardrail. You can't let corporations just make their own rules, and yeah, that just doesn't work. And it's in the interest of the public, whether you may think that that's going to cause more costs, but the health of the public is worth a lot more.
Okay, so again, I will stop you guys in the interest of time so that we can do our last question before the, why are you guys laughing? Yeah, he didn't hear me.
In Ohio and also in Flint, Michigan. You know, those places, you know, we're not in disagreement on having strong regulations for pollution and water. And, you know, that is a non-issue. Your question was about climate change.
Indeed. But now we're going to move on in the interest of time. This is my last prepared question before we turn it over to you guys. And this is about foreign policy. It's something that, you know, affects the world, right? And this is about, you know, my question exactly is, you know, what would American leadership look like under this incoming presidency? Specifically, you know, I would like to hear some answers to, I don't know, maybe I gave you guys too much. I tend to get excited. If we don't discuss, okay, let's discuss NATO, and then if you could also tell me just briefly about the position towards Ukraine and Israel, right? Because this is super, super, super important. I'm going to start with Sasha because Mike, you can't see it, but we're having an issue with your monitor, so your face has a big, at least from my screen, has a big block in front of it. So, Sasha, let's talk foreign policy. What is Harris thinking?
Vice President Harris wants to continue the good relationships that she has with other nations. And this is something that is just the democratic way to have relations with other countries, which under Trump was very flawed, I find. And now under Biden, these relations were improved vastly again. And we have to have alliances to keep peace. These are very important alliances that were made to try to avoid war and to help each other in a time of crises. And Vice President Harris sees the importance in these alliances and in building bridges and working together. That is something that is very important. And I definitely think if you want to have a president that's reflected and that is diplomatic and that puts the interest of the American people before her own lined pocket, this is the type of leadership that we need and that we should all want. And that's why I think that Vice President Harris is just the person that you can have good relations with.
So NATO would very much continue to be
absolutely
valued.
Yes.
Can you tell me about Ukraine? Would she continue Biden's policy, or is there a bit of a difference there?
She would continue the policy that is there of a country that was attacked, and to continue supporting our allies. And this is something very important, is we have our allies and we help each other, and that's what NATO is all about too.
Mm-hmm. And as far as Israel, you know, Biden has faced some pretty tough critics recently. Also within the Democratic Party, they say we have to take it a step further. He's not doing enough to stop the killings happening in Gaza right now. And so my feeling is that Harris is kind of dancing the line a little bit about what exactly she would do. Keep in mind, in the swing state of Michigan, there is a very large Muslim American population, and right now they're mad at Biden because they say that he needs to do more. What do you know? I mean, you're not, these debates, she's not Harris, right? Let's be clear. But like, what is your sense of how this is going to unfold in the future in relation to Israel?
Well, I think as strong an ally as the U.S. is, the decisions are not made by the U.S. This is a conflict that has a deep root, it's very complicated, and I am sure that Vice President Harris will do everything to help to gain peace in that region again. And just to be an ally and to try to get a peaceful resolution.
Right. And just for a little bit additional information, I'm sure you guys read the news about it, but a few days ago, Biden sent Prime Minister Netanyahu a letter saying that Israel has 30 days to ensure that Gaza is receiving the humanitarian aid and food and medicine, or else they risk continued American support. The critics say 30 days, what, are you kidding? That's way too much. That's not enough, that he needs to take a harder step. Mike, what is the feeling on the Republican side about foreign policy going forward?
Sure. First of all, I appreciate everything that Sasha has brought up there, and I respect very much the opinions of a lot of the people on the Democrat side. And the Republican side of things is we find ourselves in an interesting position this time because apparently, I don't think I made a secret of that in the past, but when I've been to these things, I've pointed out that I have also been on the Democratic side of things in previous things. One of the issues that people have has been really big problems been the military-industrial complex, and there are lots of complaints about that. And just in one area alone, you're looking at $80 billion going into Ukraine, benefiting American military contractors. General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, to name a few, and Halliburton. It's interesting that Dick Cheney's daughter, and everybody remembers Dick Cheney from the Gulf War and, the slam dunk that turned into a 20-year conflict. Those people are now, you've got one of the members of the board, former members of the board of General Dynamics is now the Secretary of Defense. And now you got Dick Cheney's daughters out there saying, promoting this kind of a thing. So in the past, the Democrats have kind of been the anti-war party, so I'm kind of surprised. But, there's been over 600,000 casualties in Ukraine between dead and wounded, 600,000 of the Russian side, just the Russian side alone. So you've got three countries. You got a country whose back up is against the wall. If Russia's willing to spend over 500,000 people to take this thing, they're in it to win it. And you've got Ukraine, whose back is up against the wall, and you've got NATO. And so we are kind of, as President Trump has pointed out, we are kind of, dancing with fire here. There's been a historical recognition that the Ukraine has had a long client-state relationship with Russia, and independent or not, the way that was handled shows that there's really a lot of maladroitness on the part of the Biden-Harris administration. And Trump's, position has been that, look, if he'd have been in office, he'd have demonstrated a level of strength and resolve that there wouldn't have been any incursion in the first place to get that started. The first part of it happened in the Obama administration, and all they gave them were MREs. And Germany, I think, offered to send some helmets after Russia invaded Ukraine. So this war in Ukraine needs to be solved, and it can't be done by just simply appeasement, and it can't be done by raising the stakes and sending more and more arms over there. It needs to have people with somebody who can sit people down and say, we got to work out a solution. As far as NATO goes, Trump didn't say that he wasn't going to support NATO anymore so much as he said that people need to pay their fair share. And that's only fair. And in fact, when Trump had as we would say, we have an expression in America, come to Jesus meeting with the leaders of NATO, he said, you guys got to pay up or we're not going to continue to support it. Because so much of NATO is American forces and American dollars, and the money that's been put in there, the European nations were cheapening. They were using that as money that they were going to pay their pensions and then calling it part of their military budget. So they were shortchanging the very organization that is their security in Europe. And so you've got to apply some level of pressure to get people to come to the table and do what they need to do. And by the way, the countries who are on the line, they've been stepping up. Your Romanias, your Polands, and your Hungaries, okay? They're stepping up because they realize there's risk. Your Baltic nations. So but the richer countries who were behind there, Germany, for example, 2 years ago, I believe when this thing started, they realized, oh, wow, we better play catch up. We haven't been paying enough into our military budget, have we? So you can check that out. But I believe, because I've been living in Germany for some 25 years, I'm pretty familiar with where they've been. And I can only tell you that if they have that attitude, that eventually American money will run out, because as Margaret Thatcher says, under socialism, eventually you run out of other people's money. And the U.S. economy is such that they're with a $33 trillion debt, the United States is going to come to a crashing halt on supporting everybody else. So this is why NATO has to pick itself up and start ponying up the money, from your larger countries. And as far as Israel goes, this thing that happened in Israel was just outlandish. There's no words to describe it. And yet the administration of the Biden-Harris administration having, on the one hand, they're saying Israel has the right to defend itself, but they're not. But they're going to withhold certain type of weaponry. They said don't go in there, and yet they did go into places, which resulted in them actually getting rid of the people who were the instigators and planners of the attacks on October 7th last year. They've been getting bombed every single day for the last year from Hezbollah. They're fighting a 5-front war. And behind all of this has been Iran, which the Western world has been kind of sitting back and saying, we'll just appease and appease and appease. And under Trump, he basically had them on the ropes. He pulled away their ability to make money, which was through their oil mainly. And the sanctions were strong. Under the Biden administration, they released it. And they also released funds that had been held by the Americans for years because of their policies and stuff. So under a Trump administration, those restrictions and sanctions will go back in place. You'll see a stronger support and an active, not just a behind the scene kind of support, but a real support for Israel. And likewise, I think that you'll find in Ukraine and in Russia, you'll find them to be able to come to a solution because there'll be strong resolve, and there'll be somebody who say, look, we need to stop common sense. And by the way, there were no new wars under Trump while he was in office. And lastly, I'll say this, that the way that the Biden administration handled the pullout from Afghanistan after 20 years of war, and my son happened to be there in Kabul, I can speak with you from firsthand knowledge that was what we would call in America a jacked up operation. So, the Biden-Harris administration has had a very expression of their foreign policy and their ability to get things done on the international stage. And again, I say that with respect to Sasha.
May I say something to
Yes, but then we got to move on.
Going back to Ukraine, Trump's solution would be handing Ukraine over to Putin, and that's why Vice President Harris would continue the support for Ukraine like we have seen in the past. And about being a weak politician, I don't agree with that, because I find to try to act like you're a strong man is not being a good politician. It's being diplomatic, it's being thoughtful, it's trying to find a solution, and it's also being honest to your public. This is something that's very important. If you make the two comparisons, if Vice President Harris says something, it can be trusted. You know that it's based on facts. If Trump says something in the news or at one of his dance rallies, you really have to think, is this the truth or is he just making something up? You have to fact check him, which he doesn't appreciate, but there's a reason for that. And so I find that there are always going to be things that are going on in the world that we cannot influence. But you want to have somebody that's in charge of your country that you trust and that you know is going to make the decisions in the interest of the people and not in self-interest, or not because you want to cozy up to a dictator. And I think that's something that really has to be thought about. And I'm amazed that this election is so, like you said, razor thin. I don't get it. Because on the one hand, you have facts, you have truth, you have diplomacy. And on the other side, you have somebody talking about immigrants that eat animals, that eat pets. Where are we if these are the two sides that we're comparing and it's a tight race? I don't understand the world, but that's where we are. And so, again, with diplomacy, with things going on, Ukraine is working towards being, would like to be a part of the EU, and we have to support those countries that want to have democracies. We have to support our neighbors. We have to be there for the countries that are trying to improve the situation for their people. And that's, again, where a diplomat tries to build these bridges and would not hand over a country to somebody that invaded them.
Going to respond to that. You know, first of all, we can.
So I know, whoa, Mike, I gotta stop you. I gotta stop you just for time. I'm not being biased right now. I promise.
No, I just.
Can you do it in like 30 seconds?
She did make a misstatement. She did make a misstatement. Okay, Trump is not saying he's going to hand Ukraine over. He did write Art of the Deal. Okay, he wants to make a deal with these guys, but he's the one who can sit down with these guys to make that deal. So, and as far as, and lastly, the last part that she says about people wanting self-determination, the eastern part of Ukraine, a lot of those people are ethnic Russians because that part was given over to Ukraine by Khrushchev. So there's got to be an understanding of that. And what the West did was set itself up for this problem, okay, because when they went into Kosovo a few years ago, and Kosovo was a part of Serbia, an historical part of Serbia. And then they went in there and they got involved in that. And now you have Kosovo separate from Serbia. And so we set a dangerous precedent. And that was done, and it caused a lot of tension between the U.S. and Russia. And they were clear about it. If you want to end this, you have to take into account the people in Ukraine. And lastly, if you're going to have fighting and you find that people need to be able to stand up for themselves and for their rights, and you have to acknowledge that the Israelis also have that same right, and we shouldn't be hamstringing them.
Okay, so let me just summarize. You know, he's saying that Trump is not saying that he's just going to give Ukraine to Russia. He's saying that Trump is a deal maker, right? He wrote that best-selling book about the art of the deal. So he's saying that we're going to encourage Ukraine and Russia to get to the table and discuss a peace deal, right? But I know you guys are probably chomping at the bit, that's a nice little expression for you, dying to ask your own questions, and I promised, so I'm going to keep my word here, and I'm going to hand you over to Katrine.
So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand and I'll come to you with the microphone. You right? Okay. Maybe say first, if you have a question, for Mike or Sasha, just let them know.
Okay. Should I stand? I wanted to ask Sasha, as you've mentioned earlier, Kamala is trying to raise or increase minimum wages. And I wanted to ask, I didn't understand how she's trying to do that. It's on cost. Is it on cost of the self-entrepreneurs, or how does she want to increase the wages without raising or without needing to raise the prices, which make everything much more expensive for the people living there, which is already the case? Yeah.
That's a very good question. You have to raise the minimum wage if you want people to be able to afford housing. For example, in California, housing is a very large topic. In many states, it's something that people can't afford, and it's causing a lot of homelessness. So people have to be able to earn more. And that's why in California, the minimum wage was raised. This is something that can be done on a state level, but not all states are in agreement on having this as a national level.
And I couldn't understand how she's intending to implement that in.
Well, she would have to propose this,
Yeah.
and then it has to go through Congress and be agreed upon. So it's something that you can make proposals, and you can bring it about. It's again diplomatic circles that you have to see which states would want to, and which states are opposing this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, but you didn't really respond to the question. The question was not why we should raise the wage, how we. Yeah, how that, where the money just not comes from from a money tree. We need the money from somewhere, and where did you get the money?
Well, the companies would have to pay that. If that's the set minimum wage, then that is what the companies have to pay their employers.
So in order to raise the federal minimum wage, you would have to get that approved through the government, right? So this means first you write the proposal, then you go to the House. This is why I spent some time talking with you guys about the balance of power in the Congress right now, because this is going to either help or hinder the incoming president, right? So first you have to go through the House, and you have to get a majority of people to say, yes, we agree to raising the federal minimum wage. Then it has to go to the Senate, and you have to do the same thing. They have to approve it. Then it goes to the desk of the president, and they can either say, yeah, this is a great idea, check, and then it becomes federal law. And that means all states have to do it, whether they like it or not. Or they can say, no, we're going to veto it, and then it's dead. So it's hard to do, but the federal minimum wage, I don't have the exact numbers in my head, but it has been raised a couple times. And how is that paid? Like she said, it's from the corporations. They have to pay. Katrine wants to say something too.
Yeah, I just talked to them again. I think the question is, like, if you raise the minimum wage, how do you make sure that not everything, like all the prices go up as well as a result?
Well, this is an argument that the corporations use for not raising the minimum wage. It always depends on who is saying it. The employers don't want to pay more. And if you heard Trump and Musk that were talking about, they were talking about employers, and if you go on strike, we're going to fire you. You as an employee do have some options to try to get more income, like going on strike. If you say, okay, we're not happy with earning $11.50, then those are options that you have, or you boycott a company that is not willing to raise what they're paying their employees. So there are mechanisms that you can do, and Kamala Harris can say, look at what California did. We would like the other states to copy this, but it doesn't mean that they will. But it's important to talk about it, to get it in discussion, and then also the public view, because public opinion also matters. If it says, well, if California can do this, why can Louisiana not do it? And then it's in the discussion, and that's how things change for the better.
May I offer a little insight?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So part of the problem with a national minimum wage is that, the cost of living in New York or in LA is significantly higher than it is in, let's say Genoa, Illinois, or Clarkton, Missouri. So if you're paying somebody $15 an hour in New York or LA, that's probably not even going to get them where they really need to be. But down in Clarkton, or in Genoa, that's quite a bit of money. And in fact, it may be more than the operator of that business can afford. And then they're going to go out of business and they're impacted. So it's a very, very complicated subject. The other aspect of it is many of these jobs that people are working now, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, is because the higher paying jobs, a lot of them, manufacturing jobs have gone away. And so a lot of lower skilled level jobs and level 1 jobs where a lot of people are working now, and so they want more because they're adults. A lot of the jobs that used to be by kids were running, teenagers just starting out working in a lot of these places. That's no longer the case. And so our economy has changed because literally the types of jobs that are out there have changed. People with the higher skill sets get paid more, but if you don't have the same skill sets that are now in demand, you might as well be at the same level as somebody who has no skill sets. And so our economy has changed, and a large part of that has been because our manufacturing base has been eroded over the last 20 years with so many jobs being sent overseas. One of the reasons why so many people who are former Democrats, or even call themselves Democrats, are voting for Trump, and who said that, is because he's trying to bring the jobs back to the United States and introduce a bit of sanity into that. And, people who are first-line workers probably should be getting less than somebody who's a supervisor or a manager. And somebody who's a skilled worker and a manufacturer in furniture, like that industry was completely decimated under NAFTA in North Carolina, just like that hurricane destroyed part of the state. So that's why people, that's a significant difference. So is it about getting the minimum wage, or is it getting jobs that are actually making sense for people to have a career? And lastly, if you raise the minimum wage, if you raise wages too much, then what companies are doing, and we all have seen this because we've all gone to the grocery stores lately, instead of companies putting enough people on the line, what do now? They have the electronic checking. And so everybody's going to that. They'll put 1 or 2 people in on a Saturday. You go to Kaufland, okay, and you're standing there with 15 people, and then everybody's going to the other electric machines. So what they've done is they've cut the services to the consumer at the same time as they've cut their employees. And that's happening over in the States too. So I think this is a very complicated problem, and I think it's more than simply raising the minimum wage.
Okay, do we have more questions over here?
Yeah, especially because of what happened towards the end of his last presidency. How can you defend still voting for Trump? Because I think especially for Europeans, one can't really imagine voting for a person like Trump. Thank you.
Well, I guess the thing is that, there's a good plurality, at least, of Americans who see that completely differently. I had a boss who used to say, we all see the tree differently. We all have to respect each other's points of view. And, as a European, you're constantly fed the news that only comes from, percolated news that's come from the States. And so the version of events that the Europeans have gotten and that has been, amplified is not necessarily the same version of events that other Americans over here have seen. And so this is why a lot of people do support President Trump, because their interpretation of the facts is different. You're probably referring to January 6th, and I would just say that, on January 5th, the president had offered the use of the military. That was declined. Nancy Pelosi has been caught on tape saying that it was her fault. This is in a conversation she had with her daughter. Of course, this was released much later, 2 years after the fact. If I was in charge of the Capitol on that day, I would have had enough common sense to make sure it was properly stocked and fortified for people if I knew a big crowd of people were coming around, especially after the trouble that they'd had over the summer. So I noticed that there was no burning or looting at the Capitol, and that Trump did say, people should go and protest, but in a legal and safe way. And he said that, and he was on that interview with Kristen Welk. He said that beforehand. And when he's talking about fight, he's not saying go out and fight and burn things down. You don't see a bunch of Republicans burning things down when things go wrong. That's not how Republicans act. We're generally a law-abiding party. That's what we promote. There's always fringes on either side. But for the most part, yeah, there's a few strange guys. You had the guy who was dressed as I don't know what he was, a shaman or something. I mean, he was just an idiot. We all can agree on that. But he was not somebody who went around. And, they should never have let anybody get beyond that first barrier. And the people who were responsible for that, the Capitol Police, the Speaker of the House of Representatives was in charge of that. She dropped the ball on it. They allowed the circumstances to develop for where that became something where people were just starting to walk in. You got grandmothers walking into the Capitol. So there's a lot of people who are uninformed and they were just following the line. And so it was a comedy of errors. But I would say that overall, there were many factors at the end of the election. And so I think, as I said, some people look at the three different ways. For myself, I wasn't there. I was in Germany. But I can say this. I don't condone that kind of action. I think that's idiotic. Let's stick to the point. Let's stick to following the rules and working the system. And at the end of the day, in the last election, the Democrats had found a way to work the system, and so they won. But that doesn't mean that American people who have a different point of view, that those people who saw what was going on but never had their cases heard because they didn't have standing, that doesn't mean that they're instantly going to forget about what happened, because there are many instances where American people said, wait a minute, that's not the way we do things. The rules were changed here. The rules were changed there in many states where things happened. And because the system denied them the normal ways of redressing those issues, there was a lot of built up resentment on people. And so this is kind of what was played into a factor of what happened. You can't put it all on Trump. You have to, there's always two sides to every story. And certainly, shooting an American service member, a former American service member, was uncalled for. And, there's a couple of people that died, but they weren't by the hands of Republican demonstrators.
I want to give Sasha some time to respond here.
I think to say that there were irregularities, these were checked. The Republicans had ample opportunities, and the court said that there were no voting irregularities. And to say that January 6th was not violent, I think is also bending the facts in a great way. And we have to hope that this time around, there is not going to be a repetition of that, and that there will be a peaceful handover of power. Because I think everybody saw the news and everybody saw what was going on, and it can't be denied. And we know that the election was not rigged, and these are facts. And I think that always repeating things that are not true is so dangerous, because there are people that only get their news from certain outlets that are feeding them these stories day and night, and then the people will believe these lies. And it's important to check your facts and make sure that the sources of your information are valid. And this again, I think if you have somebody in charge, you want that person to be believable and to be honest and truthful and making decisions based on facts and based on science and based on things that actually occurred.
Okay, we're a little bit over the time already, but I think there were some more questions. So if you want to stay, you can stay and still ask some questions if you want to. Do we have more questions? I answer. Where? Try it in German and we'll translate it.
Okay, gut. Also das Attentat auf Trump, also denken Sie, dass das inszeniert war oder nicht? Was sagen Sie dazu?
Ist die Frage an mich gestellt oder an Mike?
An Mike. The question. Did you get the question?
Nein, ich habe nicht verstanden. Kann nicht hören, gut, so gut.
Were the two assassination attempts, were they staged, or do you think that they actually were planned?
No, those were actual staged, they were not staged, those were actual assassination attempts. Absolutely. And, you know, it's amazing that people would even think that. Now, we don't know, a lot of people, because I've been here while that's occurred, a lot of people were wondering why there wasn't better protection for President Trump and why they, neglected certain things. I don't think, most people don't think it was staged. I think most people think that he was underprotected, even though he's been, there's a very, very large vocal group that doesn't like him and is so stated, in very, very, threatening ways, and have actually said that they're threatened to him. So it's interesting how that occurred. The people that were involved, especially the one in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of questions. I'm not sure when we're going to get the full answer to those. It really is amazing. But no, this was definitely, again, from what we can see from here, when I've been in the States, I don't get the feeling it was a staged event, either one.
Any other questions? Someone here wanted to say something, no? Okay. Oh, one more in the back.
Okay, this is a question for Mike. So we haven't really discussed this issue tonight, but about abortion. How are you going to make sure not to jeopardize women's health if you completely ban abortion in some states? Because I've heard about a few cases already where women have had medical emergencies and they were denied the right to have an abortion.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, in the United States, there's many states, they've got abortion is legalized, it's enshrined in their constitutions. And there's other states where that's been on the ballot and they've enshrined it into the Constitution. There are other states that they feel that it is varying degrees, is banned at certain weeks. And obviously, for people who are impacted by that, that's a problem. I can't speak to every situation because that's been reverted down to the Supreme Court level. And any legislation from the national level to try and implement a nationwide, basically opening up of all, so the abortion is legal in all 50 states would probably take a constitutional amendment. And that's kind of been the crux of it for the last 50 years. Many people had that issue was because the original decision was not made with, it was like a constitutional change and people didn't feel it was a constitutional overall for the United States Constitution because it overwent the rights of the states. I live in Illinois, I'm from Illinois. Abortion's been legal here. And in many states, as I said, it is. So for people who, if there's health is affected, most of the time, as my understanding is, again, I would have to double check it, but most of the time, if the mother's life is in jeopardy, that they should be allowed to have the abortion. And you know, I don't presume to know the mind of a mother, and I think there's a lot of issues where people make a compelling case, you know, for either side of it. It's probably one of the most difficult issues that we're facing right now. I would just say I would be very sympathetic to anybody who's in a situation if their life was in jeopardy. And I would think that that's probably the position most Republicans take. It's what they're concerned about is once things goes beyond, and I think the quickening period, which is after a certain number of days, that's where the majority of people who are against abortion are after a certain number of months. And when this becomes, you know, where this really is where they draw the line, okay? You know, at a couple of months, they don't really see that as an issue. But once it goes beyond that, and if it's for something that's not in the interest of the best interest of save the life of the mother, that's where most of the people who are out there are concerned about. So I don't know the situation that you're referring to, and I think it's probably on a case-by-case basis. But I think I can speak for most Republicans who are pro-life are, you know, of the understanding that if a mother's life is in danger, that is, or rape or incest, that is something that is not really up for debate. That's understood. Now, there are some extremists who are going to say, no, absolutely not, never, ever, okay? But like I said, there's extremists on both sides. But I think that the issue where, like was raised in the debates earlier, was going beyond the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th month. That's where people really start to have a real problem with it. And also, there's been other things about the whole, you know, where does that stop? And the slippery slope that it goes down and the cheapening of life. And I think that's a big moral issue that you know, certainly Sasha and I aren't going to solve. But I think that we have to respect the opinions and what the mothers are going through. Absolutely. And if that was the case where someone was denied medical treatment, obviously that was wrong.
And as most of you know, Vice President Harris has always stood for women's rights to their own decisions over their bodies. And so she sees that this is a decision that should be made between the pregnant woman and perhaps her doctor and nobody else. And when a woman is in a life-threatening situation, it's often too late. This decision should not be made, oh no, because there are really doctors that are afraid that they'll lose their license if they perform an abortion and later on it's proven that, oh, maybe her life was not quite in danger yet. Well, when do you make that decision? When is it too late? And so these are situations that I wouldn't want anybody to have to be in, and so the Democratic Party is definitely saying that it's only a woman's choice over her own body.
So I think we have to wrap it up because we're already 10 minutes over time. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sasha, for being here, for discussing these issues. I hope to see you again soon on November 5th. Thank you, Lauren, for moderating everything. And of course, thank you all for all your great questions and the discussion. And thanks again to the Volkshochschule to hosting this and having us here. Have a great evening. Thank you.